I'm going to start with you today.
Okay.
So we're talking about giants in sustainability on this panel. What is the responsibility of a giant in this changing world?
To do more than what the law asks us to do, because otherwise we will just all stand at the same low level. So to me, to us, the responsibility of being a global leader comes with the responsibility to set a good example and go beyond. So that's what we're trying to do.
And at Pandora, so Pandora has stopped mining silver and gold, if no one knows that. I didn't realize before today. And you only source recycled silver and gold now, if that's right. So what difference has that made to your carbon footprint, and what prompted you to make that change?
Yeah, so our main raw material is silver. It constitutes the most of our products, and gold. And so when we look at the impact of our company, not just what we're doing, but the whole supply chain, silver and gold is all the difference, right? So what we looked at was, this is just not going the right way. Circularity is going the wrong way. We're less circular now than we were but just 10 years ago. So we decided to shift all of this. And the difference is about 2/3 of the emissions that we cut off on that main raw material. So it's lowering our emissions. That alone is lowering our emissions by 20%, which is a very nice step towards decoupling growth from growth, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So 20% is quite a big number.
It's quite a lot. It's a big number. So we're down in a period of time where we have almost grown the company 50%. Our CO2 emissions are down 17% in actual numbers. So 50% bigger company, 17% lower emissions across the value chain, and that's because of this.
Yeah. Okay. And Dirk, I'll come to you now at Volkswagen. So, we're talking about corporate sustainability commitments, and I feel like this has become a bit of a buzzword in recent years. So what do corporate sustainability commitments mean nowadays? And also, how can we hold you accountable for them?
Well, first of all, I think corporate commitments, in a way, need to come from a strategy. You need to have really embedded into a solid strategy, a group strategy, and if you have to have a sustainability strategy. And there you need to be consistent. It's very, very important to set up the long-term goal or vision, like we do with becoming a nature and society positive mobility provider. You have to set clear ambition and KPIs, monitor it through the system, and anchor it in the businesses. I think this is really, really important. If you don't anchor it in the business, it tends to become and remain to become a project. So consistency is super important. And innovation is super important, because we are currently seeing ourselves in transforming in a level of uncertainty where we need to have agility and innovation to drive it, like electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, circular economy in a way. And then certainly it is about partnerships. And so as Mats is saying, and we most likely hear it later on, you need the best partnerships to really get the best out of it. Nobody can really do it alone. Standing to those commitments and deliver on those commitments.
Yeah, and you mentioned that nature positive is one of the things Volkswagen stands for. What does that look like for a car brand? What does nature positive mean?
For it means really at the end of the day, we are currently extracting and distracting, let's say, elements. Like we are mining. You went to, let's say, recycled silver. We have a little bit more tonnage per car than you have for jewelry, in a way. So reducing it through circularity, for example. Really investing into biodiversity and ecosystems. So we are this year, in a few weeks, we were launching a fund with 25 million euros per year just to push biodiversity beyond our responsibility. And Mats, you said it, if we stick to our own fences, if we stick to our own compliance, we won't make it. So we need to go beyond. And if you just look at the US Overshoot Day being around in the early August, it tells a story that we have to move him back to the 31st of December.
And you mentioned a more circular system there. Olesya, I'll come to you, because I know at Philips, one of your big things is circularity. Tell us more about that.
That's right. Indeed. So in Philips, we don't have a separate sustainability strategy, but sustainability is part of our company strategy. And the circular economy is part of this. Next also to the eco-design. For all our new products, we do them eco-designed. And also commitment to access and health equity and partnerships. On the circularity as an example, I'll give you an example of product. So Philips, we are a health tech company as a part of the tech of healthcare. And actually the context of this, we believe that sustainability is about human health. Because the healthcare itself has a carbon footprint globally more than aviation or the shipping industries. While half of the global population don't have access to basic healthcare services. Yeah? So something needs to change. Circular economy is a beautiful discipline or topic for innovations, for sustainability performance. As an example, one of the greatest but also the largest diagnostic systems is MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. It's a beautiful diagnostic system in hospital or imaging centers. And conventional MRIs are usually using the large amount of the scarce natural gas helium. Right? As principles of circularity is use less, right? Use longer, use again, or recycle. And then use less. We in Philips, we innovate in the product in a completely different way, that instead of 1,600 of scarce gas helium, that is only in a few places on the airs, and we are running out of this, we designed a system that uses 7 liters, and we completely sealed it. Yeah? We do not need to replenish it. Then it also makes the system lighter, more possible to place in different places, even put it on wheels. Next step on it is also reuse or use again. On this MRI system, we offer our customers, hospitals or diagnostic centers, so you can get a new system, or we can actually upgrade the current system, use a lot of weight of the materials to keep it there, and upgrade it to the most technologically advanced next model, right? And then it reduces the carbon footprint of the material by 45%, as an example.
So the kind of second-hand market you're talking about, we were talking about this the other day, but hospitals, for example, are they happy to receive second-hand medical devices? You know, do they worry that if it's not new, it might be subpar, or are they okay with that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to name it differently. We need to call this differently. It's not second-hand, as we say, this circular solution, right? Because we need to basically to communicate more about sustainability and circular economy and its possibilities. And as an example, also recently in Denmark, one of the large hospital chains, they opted for circular solution systems, not the second-hand, as you call it, although in practice that's the old meaning of this. We need to communicate, we need to explain, to advocate for this, and then also customers find the beautiful value in this.
I think language, what you're saying is language is very important. And Ioannis, I'll come to you now. So, you know, you're coming from the academic perspective at the London Business School. Tell us, you know, how do you define corporate success really in the midst of a climate crisis?
That's an easy one. So I'm glad you're starting with that question, Maeve. I think, listen, the way that I personally perceive what is currently happening in the environmental and social domain is essentially a disruption. Companies, as you've heard from your esteemed guests here, are facing unprecedented pressures to be responsible, and those pressures are coming from customers, from investors, from supply chains, from civil society, from their employees, right? Laws and regulations by governments. In other words, if you're a great executive and you go to work on Monday morning, you kind of realize that your entire ecosystem of stakeholders is demanding something different. So what I often say to my students is that even if you don't inherently care about the issues, but you want to run a good business, how could you possibly not address all of these environmental and social challenges? Now, the challenge of corporate success in that context then becomes a problem of adaptation. How do I understand, reconcile, and ultimately integrate and leverage all of these conflicting demands and expectations across the different stakeholders? And of course, we have a number of successes around the world, but it's not easy, right? It's not easy because there's a huge gap between what companies did in the past and what they are asked to do. So for instance, lack of human capital. You are an insurance company. You want to price in climate risk. Well, do you think the world's climate scientists are sending in their CVs to work for insurance companies these days? They don't. So where are you going to find the human capital to build organizational capability in order to develop the absorptive capacity sometimes? For instance, we've heard technology be mentioned today many times. Well, yeah, but technology is not just, I found a new technology, I bring it in. You have to be able to absorb it. You have to create that integration mechanism. Well, for many companies, this whole idea of environmental and social issues is new. So there is no absorptive capacity to bring in those technologies. And ultimately, for better or for worse, mostly for worse, we've been through the 50, 60, 70 years of shareholder primacy. What does that mean? It means as businesses, we develop the capability to manage our investors. All public companies have an investor relations department, right? But how about the rest of the stakeholders?
Yeah.
If you want to understand this disruption, you have to develop an equal capability as in the same way that you're handling your investors for the ecosystem. So for all of those reasons, success, it's about understanding the ecosystem shift, and on top of that, building those 3-4 underlying capabilities that allow you to adapt through a disruption.
And the shareholder shift that you're talking about is ultimately down to profit maximization, as I was saying at the beginning, or at least in part. How do we manage that going forward? You're all three very major companies in Europe. How do we balance profit maximization and returns with sustainability? Do the two go hand in hand?
To us, they go hand in hand. So
Okay.
what we've done is our entire financing of the company, revolving credits or bank loans, bonds, all of that is tied to ESG performance. So we don't deliver on our targets, we don't get the proper interest rate, or we pay more. Our entire incentives program is tied to ESG. We don't deliver, we get less bonus. So really kind of into the mechanics of what is driving executives or individual executives. This matters, and it's not like one or the other, it's the two, right? So I have financial targets and I have ESG targets. So when we wanted to shift our whole supply chain to recycle silver, we put that as a target for the top 50 of the company. And so clearly now this becomes something that you run towards, but you do it at the same time as you work with profits. And I think the big danger is in looking at these as necessarily opposites, right? As you point out, a well-run company today is kind of just by default also a responsible company. You cannot be, at least not in the long run, very successful without doing it, right?
Yeah. And you say in the long run, it's kind of long-term resilience v short-term returns.
But maybe I can add to that. I think I fully agree, and I think it has to baked and embedded into the bonus system and really, let's say, hardwired in a certain degree so that happens. But what I'm seeing more and more is if you look at sustainability as creating value for nature, society, and business, I think it's a short-term and long-term balance as well. And it's also about the license to operate, the license to sell. And I think you mentioned it, Mats, in the beginning, saying what is our responsibility as larger corporations is going beyond. And if we deliver a purpose, if we authentically live to it and see it and put it, and also live through certain values, which are currently to a certain degree deteriorating in our society, companies become a very interesting, let's say, element of society and business to keep and maintain values. And it really goes down to democracy, where our CEO stood up on very often and said, no, we need to talk about democracy, and we as Volkswagen have a stake in it, that this maintains in a way. And that drives, at the end of the day, also talents, because talents see it, looks at it, and at that point in time, they may find your brand, because they say, oh, there's a stand, there's a purpose, there's a value, which I would like to go into it, and this is also sustainability.
And I mean, Ioannis, is growth and sustainability, are they oxymorons?
So let me start with the profit aspect because it leads into growth. So first of all, I do understand, and a lot of people discuss a potential trade-off between profitability and sustainability. But you know what? If we had no trade-offs, managers would be out of a job, right? Because if everything was win-win, why do you need a trained manager to take decisions? Right? Everything is a trade-off. Why is it that executives cannot go to work on Monday morning and say, I'm going to double all salaries for everyone? Because there's a trade-off. Why can I double or triple my sales budget tomorrow? Because there's a trade-off. I don't have unlimited resources. So sustainability in this context, what differentiates, in other words, the successful companies is those that thrive with these trade-offs, that find the innovative ways to overcome and resolve them. Now, to your question about growth, it of course, it depends on what type of growth are you talking about. Because if we talk about sustainability in the context of a green transition or a zero carbon economy, who is going to rebuild that economy? Who is going to replace the entire automobile fleet, for instance? Who is going to rebuild the infrastructure? Who is going to retrofit the buildings? Of course, you need a very strong growing economy within the proper guardrails. And for me, the guardrails are the planetary boundaries, right?
And what are the guardrails?
Sorry?
What are those guardrails?
Yeah, for me, the science. The science around these topics. The science of planetary boundaries, about what we can and cannot do. So an economic growth that is green-oriented, that has this strong component of rebuilding the infrastructure or refitting the infrastructure within those boundaries, and of course with all the ethical and social standards, then of course it's a necessary condition rather than a contradictory to sustainability.
Yes.
I'd like to build on that, exactly. Well, first of all, Philips has environmental profit and loss account as part of our annual report. Yeah? And it's a part of the company strategy, company external commitments. But also what Ioannis mentioned, it's about looking at the industry where we operate. So let's take healthcare and health tech. And exactly we are teaming up with our customers and suppliers to decarbonize healthcare. Right? In the end, so that's the future-proof growth and where everybody wins. Yeah? But it's the commitment of the company to innovate, but partner across the value chain, and this is how we innovate for the better. And I think fantastic impact area, exactly not in front of us, but we are in the middle of it, in the industries that we operate in.
Making it really integral.
Exactly.
Yes. And so I also, before we move on to another subject, I just wanted to quickly talk about waste, because, you know, we all work here. We've got 3 people, you all work in physical products, and we're all talking about circular systems, but what do we do with the waste? What do we do with the cars that, the scrap metal? What do we do with the, the old, the gold that was mined that you're not using? What do we do with the medical equipment that becomes obsolete?
Yeah, excellent topic. So first of all, in our factories, we have the specific waste policies and the measures and targets and continuous improvement in order to send zero waste to landfill, unless it's required by the local legislation. Right? So I would like to make this important mark. In terms of the health systems, we are committed to take back all the large medical systems that are made available to us. And it's interesting point, available to us, right? So we encourage the hospitals, the health system, indeed, let's close the loop together. And this is where we use our own supply system, or we work with a network of recyclers for that part. There's also a lot of things are still to be done, but we are very optimistic and positive and committed to that.
Mas?
Yeah, so we, the past couple of years, have sent no waste to landfills. We repurpose or recycle it to other uses, either in our own facilities or with suppliers. So no waste to landfills. And then, and that basically kind of also goes into why we're thinking about circularity for the materials. Now, granted, we're a little bit lucky because some of the materials we're using can actually be recycled over and over and over again, right? So silver is silver. Gold is gold. You can use it a million times.
That's quite unique to your materials.
Which is unique. So we're a little bit fortunate. But it still requires you set up the value chains to kind of recover it. So we shifted also so that if we have like surplus production, we got stuff out in our stores that you don't want to buy, we take it back and we remelt it and we make new jewelry that maybe then you're going to like, right? So it's kind of a pretty close loop. The last piece we're missing is to ask you to bring back your...
and that's on the
from
consumer.
Your ex or somebody, right? So you bring it back and we can burn it.
Right, so that's about incentivizing consumer habits, which is a different thing.
Exactly,
But from a volume business, cars are slightly different than jewelries. If you just look, let's say a car is about 1.5 to 2 tons. We adjust from a Volkswagen perspective, from a group, we have 9 million cars. You can see how many, let's say, new material we bring onto the ground globally. And we have set ourselves a target by 2040. 40% of that material needs to be and will be from recycled material. And what we will see is a shift in the whole value chain of recycling by cars. I fully agree, reuse, don't use is also part of circularity. But very often we see now with the batteries of the electromobility, which is really now taking up grabs and going there is a different value in the car. And this value will change the whole value chain of how to recycle cars, getting the car back, dismantling it, using parts a second or a third time, getting into the material streams, polymers, aluminium, steel, and of course, very importantly, the battery materials, cobalt, manganese, and lithium. So this will change, and I can't agree more. Everything is based on partnerships. Nobody can do it alone. So you really have to design the circle so that everybody gains, including the environment, because you need less material, less reduced carbon footprint on the recycled material. So it helps us on our decarbonization pathway significantly, and it makes ourselves resilient. Just see it from a European or German perspective, that there is a less resilient supply chain or dependency on other countries. And it will also create jobs and welfare at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is something to be considered. And again, I'm coming back to the point is, how can we move beyond compliance? And this is also one part how we can do it.
Yeah. So cooperation is really key, kind of
Absolutely.
cross-sector. So Ioannis, are these giants doing enough? Tell us. Because you're an academic. You know a lot on this subject. They all seem very impressive. They have incredibly thorough strategies. But are they doing enough?
Yeah, you left all the easy questions for the end. So let me try to answer that. I think that if we were to look at sort of what is the objective here, whether you want to call it a green transition or living within the planetary boundaries and so on and so forth, there's clearly a need for change. And that change is happening at multiple levels. At individuals, consumption behaviors and so on, at organizations, at governments, and at institutions, a lot of the times international institutions. So the critical role for business is that, of course, you can take decisions as an organization. For instance, we were just talking about waste, right? Clearly, companies, through their decisions, can drive a lot of change, but also they can influence consumer behavior, and they can influence laws and regulations to build the infrastructure to allow for recycling, the circular economy, and so on, and through governments to also influence international institutions to avoid, for instance, one country's waste being transferred to or exported to another country's waste.
Yeah.
So in answering your question, are they doing enough? We need to consider if they're doing enough within the constraints of a system that clearly has these other three pillars that need to coordinate. And at the end of the day, we can move as quickly as the slowest of those wheels. Right? And therefore, the extent to which business within its own domain is accelerating and influencing, then it can actually accelerate and, as the title suggests today, drive that change. Are they doing enough? I think that there is huge diversity across sectors. Right? In some sectors, for instance, if you talk about automobiles, if you talk about energy, for instance, and so on and so forth, there is acceleration more so than what happened before, and many other industries, by the way. There are others that are very slow. Think about steel, for instance, or in heavy industry production. Think about transportation, for example. So the challenge there is to learn what has worked and what has accelerated some of these industries, and how can we transfer those learnings as businesses and as governments to those sectors that are still lagging behind.
So for you, the change is really being driven business first. That will maybe hopefully have a ripple effect when it comes to regulatory environments, when it comes to policy, when it comes to consumer. But businesses are really driving that.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I think that if you look at the science of where we are, I don't think we have the luxury of saying first or second. It's, in those multiple choice questions is all of the above and hope for the best. So I think we're precisely in that category. So it's all of those social actors acting together and with expediency to get there. It's not a matter of, for me at least, it's not a matter of first or second. It's about alignment across all of them and acceleration.
And so, something that I think is a bit of an elephant in the room sometimes when we do these panels that are to do with products is, at the end of the day, if true sustainability means consuming less, should we be telling everyone to stop buying your products?
I think it's an excellent question. If I take a healthcare perspective, right, so where we need to basically double healthcare as it is, so that people have better quality care for everyone, right? It's not possible,
It's
right?
not a choice.
We need to innovate to design it together for the future-proof, right? And this is where we as a company, we will use our best capabilities and we will reinvent and innovate together with customers and partners. That's a short answer.
Yeah.
Let's talk less about than the corporate part, but I would like to mention beautiful heart hospital TAIS in Finland. It's one of our partners on sustainable healthcare because they do an amazing job. They look into the sustainability of their healthcare, but also in the patient pathway, per patient. What's the pathway and how to make it sustainable accordingly.
Yeah, so I'll let you off because medical equipment, you know, we do need medical equipment. Do we need cars? Do we need jewelry?
Some would say you need jewelry, but
Who would say that?
I meet people.
Would you say
every now
that?
and then. I met somebody just before they said
Okay.
they need it, right?
Okay.
But you don't, of course, need it as much as you need medical treatment for sure, right? So it becomes a question of when is it enough? When are we doing enough? I think there's a broader perspective to take to this. What we can look at is we can bring down our jewelry pieces so that they have a footprint that is less than the cafe latte you had in the warm-up room, right? So that's very low. Is that low enough to justify what we are creating in terms of economy and claiming that we can actually substitute products that are not as good as the ones that we bring to the market, right?
Yeah.
But for sure, at the end of the day, it would be better that we all consumed less, right?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
I think we need mobility. And depending where you are, you may need a car. If you're in the northern part of Sweden, you're happy to have a car to come from one place to the other, bring your kids to school, go to work, go to university, go grocery shopping. If you're in Stockholm or in a larger city, you need different kind of mobility. And we're seeing larger cities are changing. Automated driving. We are investing very much into pool riding, for example, and other mobility services. So I think that we will see a shift in the portfolio. But I think we all need mobility because mobility is where we're really, let's say, developed on. It's a part of our education, of our society. And that's why I think companies like the Volkswagen Group, we will offer mobility. And we're calling ourselves mobility provider, shifting from individual mobility into other areas as well. But they will always be a part of individual mobility.
That will be needed. Yeah. And Ioannis, just, you know, before we finish, I wanted to ask you, if there's companies watching, you know, is sustainability expensive?
Half of it is. So I would say that sustainability has two stories embedded in one. The first story that we also see through regulation is that it's time to pay the bill. We have been abusing, wasting, over-extracting resources, and everyone needs to get to the same level playing field. But truth of the matter is that level playing field is going to be more expensive, simply because, don't get me wrong, it is expensive now. We are paying for it in a different way, right? So it's important to do that. The other part, the growth part, the replacement part, the innovation part, absolutely is profitable and it's a growth opportunity. So ultimately, I think we need to balance bringing everyone at the same level playing field, and then allowing the best of companies to innovate the solutions that we need. So it's a bit of both.
So upfront cost for long-term win.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's super short on that because I think it's wrong to just look at the cost of it, right? So we pay maybe $10 million a year for using recycled silver, but we get back many times more in terms of how our employees appreciate it, how our investors appreciate what we're doing. So not even counting in the consumer, because actually most of us don't really shop with sustainability up front, right?
Yeah.
But it pays back, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the fact of how people look at brands and how they trust brands today. So there's a lot of benefits associated with this.
Trust is a big one.
Trust is a big one.
And we know, just to add up, you know, customers, consumers tend to buy from companies, and we have data for it, which are perceived to be more sustainable when an equal product. But again, coming to the point of transforming it, you know, we need to be consistent in our strategy and our implication. We need, I think, some innovation, and I think, as you said, without partners, it won't fly. And I think this is the biggest learning of over the last decade. Even giants can't make it alone. They need partners to push the needle.
Yeah. And that's actually something that's very good about this kind of summit, is that we can all come together and hopefully collaborate and cooperate more, which is a nice note to end on as we've come to our time. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and please give a big round of applause to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you and see you soon.